Hey everyone, welcome to Hampshire Spaniel Training, and Billy and me today are going to be doing a video on some key points in around retrieving. So trying to cover a few things that I think are quite important, and I'm also going to go through the order that I tend to teach things. Okay, so starting with a very basic retrieve, then we're going to be teaching a back retrieve. Then we're going to teach a back retrieve on both sides. So that means using my right hand to turn the dog to my right to go back, and my left hand to turn the dog to my left to go back. We're then going to do lefts and rights and talk about the importance and bits and pieces around that. Straight sends and how we bolt that all together. That's the plan. I'm not going to go too into depth on each individual retrieve because I've covered them in lots of my other training vlogs on the Gundog Basics Series, which is what this is part of. But I'm just going to sort of try and show you the order that I do stuff in. Isn't that right, Billy? So we're going to start off with the straight basic retrieve. Now, you'll have seen this through Billy's and Charlie's vlogs right at the very beginning. I'm sure he's going to think, what am I doing when I do this in a moment? I'm also going to talk about any key points that I think are important along the way. I'm also going to talk about two different retrieves. Predominantly, I do most of my retrieving with two dummies. It's our 150 gram natural rabbit skin dummy with a toggle, and then the high vis water dummy. Now, they have different purposes. Not all dogs will feel the same way about one retrieve. I'm quite lucky, Charlie and Billy both like to pick both. Saying that though, if I had the two down, they would pick that over that every time. But if as long as I'm using that and they don't bump into that, then we're absolutely fine picking that. And that's pretty typical, I find, most of the time. When I want a dummy to really stand out, this is what I'm using, and that might be dictated by the conditions, where I am, etc. And if I can get away with it, then I'll use this, but obviously this isn't so bright. A couple of little tips with these dummies is you can, if you want them to stand out, and you'll see why I want them to stand out in a minute when I talk about it, is to put like a white sock or a sweat wristband, like a tennis white sweat wristband. I put one of those on there. Doesn't really increase the size or the weight of the dummy, but then suddenly makes it stand out. You can chuck that in the washing machine, and you know, you can keep that nice and bright, so for when it really, really matters. All our products are available in our shop on Hampshire Spaniel Training, but also Spaniel Training Kit. I'll put a link in the description. Right, let's get on with some training. Right, so we're going to start off with the basic retrieve sit. You'll see I've got my little retrieving lead on. I'm a massive advocate of these. You'll see it all through my vlogs. It's an easy way to keep control of the dog, prompt the dog without having all the faff and all the bad habits that can come with the dog coming back and you trying to grab them or putting a lead on, all those sorts of stuff. I've covered it loads, but got my little training lead on. I don't need to use it with him now, but I'm trying to show you what I would be doing. So I've got my two different dummies here straight away. He likes that dummy, so I'm going to come back round again. Good boy, sit. Be nice and firm with him. So I'm going to put the retrieve out, okay? And this is just effectively going to be a straight send. Right. Good boy, good boy. Sit. Good lad. So I have a saying now, which is left hand lead, right hand retrieve. He hasn't done anything for 2 days, so he's pretty vibrant. So left hand onto the lead, right hand onto the retrieve, dead. Dead. Good boy. Heel. So we're going to do a straight send again. So I've thrown the retrieve, it's a visual mark. This is a basic straight send. This is about the dog recognizing the commands. Okay, so I like my dogs to look at me. Lots of people don't. This is just my way. I feel at a novice level, if your dog checks in with you, they're much less likely to run in. I would rather a dog slightly mismark than a dog run in. Because long term, there's more of a problem with the dog running in than a dog slightly mismarking. Other people might argue otherwise, but that's the way I view it. Okay, so you can see eye contact. That way, if I just throw my arm out or I say back, neither of those things send the dog. They have to be together. Right. Okay, those two things together. Good boy, good boy. Sit, left hand lead, right hand retrieve, dead. Thank you. I'm going to take that gently heel. Okay, sit. So as I just said previously, just throwing my arm out or saying back on its own is not enough to send the dog. I always say it's a bit like two safe keys that have to be turned at the same time. If those two keys are not turned at the same time, the safe doesn't open. If I just do that, it doesn't send the dog. If I say back, it doesn't send the dog. Those two things have to come together. Right, on to the next bit, back retrieves. As soon as I have taught a straight send, like in that format, I am doing a back retrieve. Okay, so you'll see this on a lot of my videos. So we're going to sit the dog up, going to put the retrieve down, going to turn into him, walk away, sit. Now what's important here is the dog properly has his back to retrieve. He's slightly favouring pointing that way now. So I'm just going to straighten him up. So one of the things that I won't compromise on is that the dog must be absolutely straight. Okay, I'm going to take a little step to the right, and then I'm going to push him with my right hand, and I expect him to turn to my right, his left, to go back. Good boy, good boy. Sit. So I'm going to do the same on the other side. You're always a bit of a monkey with that. Heel. Sit. So I'm going to put the retriever out, turn into him, heel. So now I'm going to do sit the other side this time. So now I'm going to put the lead into my right hand, use my left hand and push him back. But again, you see that doesn't send him and back doesn't send him. They have to come together. Right. So one of the things, one of the things when I'm training with my friends, trial training, is we'll practice sometimes trying to accidentally send each other's dogs. And that's because I want to make sure my dog is bulletproof and it doesn't accidentally see a very casual send as a command, okay? The most likely thing is that once you start shooting birds for a dog, or the dog gets really, really keen, even with dummies, is that they see the littlest bit of mere movement and they interpret that as a send. So that's why at the beginning I like to have very clear physical and very clear verbal commands. A lot of people are like, fetch it, or you know, they're just very, very casual, and it doesn't seem to matter, but it will really show later on. As I said, I need to be able to do whatever I want. I'll come in behind my mate, try and send his dog, everything. I want that dog to be bulletproof and not go till he's ready. So we've got a back retrieve, sit. So we've got a back retrieve with both hands, okay? So as soon as I've got a straight send, I'm now into the back retrieve. Key points to measure here, okay, is this all needs to be done on really short grass, and it doesn't have to be done in a big space at the beginning. This is probably, I don't know, maybe, I would say this is 20 feet along and it's probably 40 or 50 feet this way. I can do so much training on this space. I don't need lots of space. Straight send, back with my right, back with my left. I don't teach, I'm going to come a bit closer to the camera. Sit. I don't teach lefts and rights until I've taught back retrieves, because they can interfere and make teaching backs a little bit more difficult. Lefts and rights are predominantly an easier maneuver to teach a dog. So I go for the more difficult one, which is getting the dog to turn with my right hand and turn with my left hand first. Okay, that leads on to a question. I often get asked, why do I bother doing that? It's a good question. If, for example, a bird had been shot out to my left, but I want to pick something that's back behind the dog. If I can turn my dog away from that bird that's out there to go back, you've got a much better chance of picking the retriever you want. If my dog only turns one way and it happens to be the direction where it's seen a bird go the other way, the chances are, if you haven't done your training well, the dog will go for the wrong bird. So being able to turn the dog away and go back is really important. The other thing is, if you get really advanced, dogs can actually pick up the difference between a left and a right, so pure 90-degree left and a right, a back retrieve with each hand, and they can actually then go on that quarter, okay? So rather than pushing them right or completely back, you can push them out at that angle and they'll go out somewhere between those two positions. That's something that not all dogs can pick up on, and it takes a lot of training, but that's another reason why I do it. And ultimately also just because I want the dog to go where I want, when I want, okay? So we're going to talk about the lefts and rights next, okay? So we've got a back retrieve with our right, back with our left. That's really key. Taught both of those. Now, once I've done that, and you might have to spend a few weeks on that or a month or two on it. It's, you know, it takes a while for most people, and everything's done very, very close to start. But as soon as they can do that, I then can go into my left and right, and that's what I'm going to show you next. Right, so we're going to do a left and a right now, and I'm going to talk about some of the key points with this. Again, at this early stage when I'm teaching these lefts and rights, this is not about hunting an area out. In fact, none of these retrieves are about hunting an area out. It's about a dog purely reading a command and going where I send them. Okay, and this is really, really important. Now, I'm going to talk about turning actually, that will come with this first. So, what are you looking at? When a dog is good, it will learn to turn, this is key, and run. A novice dog will turn and run at the same time. And if when that dog turns, Billy, if when that dog turns, it doesn't see the retrieve straight away, it won't get in the habit of going pure 90 degrees or pure 180 degrees. So in fact, I'll just show you quickly, sit. So if I'm the dog now, okay, a young dog will turn, normally come towards you a bit, bow, and then straighten up onto the retrieve, okay? An experienced dog will turn and then run in a straight line. Same on the back retrieve. An inexperienced dog will try and turn, sit, Billy, will try and turn and run at the same time. Once they get good, they will turn and then run. And the key to doing this and getting that dog to learn to turn and run and not do them both at the same time is that they must be finding the retrieve in the same spot every time relative to their position. So he's straight to me now. That back retrieve must always be directly behind the dog in a straight line. And when he's first learning this, he must be able to turn and see it instantly. If he doesn't, he will never learn to turn and run. He will learn to turn and run at the same time. And that means that your dog can end up anywhere. Fine if they see the retrieve, okay? But if they can't see the retrieve, they won't learn to do that well. And I see it a lot with young dogs. The dog will come towards the handler first when they go to do the left and the right. They see the retrieve and straighten up, and that's the right thing, but they must see the retrieve straight away. And so if you're throwing dummies out of eye shot on those early retrieves, there's a good chance your dog will not get confident at turning and running. And if you want that dog to become a really good handling dog and go where you want it to, in the early months, and I'm talking about months and months, it all needs to be visually orientated. Eventually it won't be, and you'll want the dog to hunt an area out. But at the beginning, it's really, really important. Every time that dog turns, it sees the retrieve straight away. Turns, sees the retrieve straight away. That will give the dog confidence at finding the retrieve in the same spot based off its position of you now. So if you see Billy's now, every time I do a handling maneuver, he's absolutely dead straight because I'm trying to teach him a compass, and his compass is based off my position and him facing me. And if he's facing a different way every time, he's going to be going off at angles at different times. Sorry, he'll be going off at different angles constantly. And I want him to learn to find the retrieve off that bearing in the same place every time and repeat, 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 repeat. And that starts with always making sure that your retrieves are always visual at the beginning. Okay, so when you first start putting those retrieve outs, be really petty about how far they are, whether the dog can see them or not. If I had a retrieve, sit Billy, if I had a retrieve and it landed awkwardly into some cover like that, I would walk out and pull it back onto the cover. Because this drill is not, at the beginning, any drill that you're doing is not about the dog hunting to find it. It's about the dog reading a command, making the right choice, and then picking the retrieve with no fuss. That's a different thing later on, teaching a dog to handle and then hunting an area out. Okay, so, good boy, Billy. Bit bored of this, aren't you? So, we've got our back retrieves, we've got our lefts and our rights. I'm not going too deep into this because I've done lots of videos actually on these individual bits, but I'm trying to explain obviously why I put those together. And as I said at the beginning, make sure the dog is always facing, make sure that retrieve to the right and the left are always 90 degrees, and that the retrieves behind the dog are absolutely bang behind the dog, and that they can see them as soon as they turn. So that dog learns to trust your command because they find the retrieve in the same spot and they never deviate off that line at the beginning. Okay, so we've got lefts, rights and backs. Then we're going to do straight sends. I made a video on that a few weeks back. I'll put that in the link in description. It's opposite work, teaching the dog to run out. Okay, now something I wanted to cover because I get asked about this quite regularly. People say to me, why do I do a stop whistle before I send the dog? And it's a really good question. Well, the answer is training a gun dog is like Lego. You build little parts and then you click them together. Okay, now I will spend months and months and months left, right, back, left, right, back, left, right, back, slowly increasing the distance out from the dog. Okay, now you've got to imagine that you're getting to a more advanced level now. You've sent your dog out on a memory or a blind, you've stopped the dog, and at that point you've stopped the dog, you're now going to go into a maneuver. It might be left, right, back with either hand. And you're trying to splice those two bits together. And where you're picking up from in your handling is that you've just imagined that you've just stopped the dog and then you're going into that maneuver. Okay, so we've got a slight overlap between two bits of training. I've sent the dog out, I'm imagining I've just stopped it, and then I'm going into that movement. That dog then, when you first start stopping the dog, recognizes that sequence because you've done so much back, left, right, etc. Okay, so that's why you'll always see me do a stop whistle in my handling maneuver, because it's the overlap that will come later when I put those two bits of training together. Okay, so we've got straight sends, backs with either hand, lefts and rights. When I first started doing straight sends, so up a hedgerow or a line, again, it's about building your dog's confidence, okay? And again, everything at the beginning is visual. It's all visual based. I want the dog to get confident at running and picking the retrieve. And if you make the dog have to hunt for the retrieve before you've got their confidence to run, okay, then especially with spaniels, they're prone to getting a certain way out and then starting hunting. So to be able to switch that on and off, you want nice short grass to start with, you want the retrieve that the dog can always see, and you want to build on that distance gradually, always to the same spot, always to the same spot. At a later date, once the dog, you're confident in the dog's ability to run out in a straight line, then you could start using like a rabbit dummy where they're not going to be able to necessarily see it until maybe they get 2/3 of the way out, or even like just before they're going to get there. But if you start doing that before you've built that confidence and running and not looking back, so that's another key point. You might have seen people do this. They send their dogs, the dog runs out a certain distance and the dog spins. When a dog is spinning, that's the dog telling you that it's probably been pushed on the distance too quick. So if you send the dog and it spins and it looks for help and you say back, that tells me two things. One, you've increased the distance too quickly, and so the dog isn't confident and keeping on running. So you need to think, okay, the problem is if you then help that dog will start to spin and look for help regularly. So the real key point is to build on that distance, build on that distance, build on that distance very, very gradually, so that dog doesn't question whether there's a dummy there, and that's why you then won't hopefully get that spinning. Anyway, I hope I've covered enough different things here. I'm sure I probably have missed stuff. I always watch my videos back, obviously, when I'm editing and think, damn, I should have got that in there. Don't forget, you can follow Billy and Charlie's stud page, Win Hocklin Spaniel Stud Dogs. I'll put a link in the description for that. All training products are available on either our Facebook page, Hampshire Spaniel Training or Spaniel Training Kit. So if you want any stuff, go on there. Otherwise, happy training, guys.